Nicholas II was not suited to the job of Tsar. After an indulged upbringing, he had married a German princess, Alexandra, and become a devoted family man. But in 1894, after the assassination of his father, Alexander III, Nicholas was appointed supreme ruler of all Russia. As Tsar, he was God's representative on earth with the power of life and death. In desperation, Nicholas confessed to his brother-in-law, "I am not prepared to be a Tsar. I never wanted to become one. I know nothing of the business of ruling. I have no idea of even how to talk to the ministers." The empire Nicholas inherited was so vast that when the sun rose along the western frontier, it was already setting in the east. St. Petersburg was the capital and housed the Tsar's court. The city's architecture had a strong European influence, and French was the spoken language. After years of expansionist policies, the Russian population was a diverse ethnic mix and totaled around 170 million people. There was a large gap between rich and poor. Wealthy nobles and landowners lived a luxurious life, but they were the minority. Over 80% of people were peasants, freed from serfdom in 1862, but still bitterly poor. Population growth, taxes, and crop failures had led to widespread poverty and famine. Industrialization was also changing Russia. Mining was opened up through foreign investment, and railways were constructed across the empire, exposing people to new ideas and goods from the West. With the promise of work and money, many peasants moved off their farms to the cities, which disrupted traditional village life. Unhygienic slums developed around factories, and people worked long hours in dangerous conditions for very low pay. But such large congregations of workers allowed the ideologies of revolutionary groups to spread. Many groups had agendas based on the classic struggle theories of Karl Marx. One of the more radical was the Russian Social Democratic Party. In 1903, the party split over how to bring about a revolution, forming the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin. These revolutionaries channeled people's discontent into a political movement. In response, the Tsar tightened his grip on social control, making strikes and unions illegal and using the secret police, or Okhrana, to suppress antagonists. Those suspected of working against the Tsar were executed or exiled to Siberia. In the early years of the 20th century, Russia was expanding to the east, Japan to the west. Tension arose over who should control Manchuria. In February 1904, the Japanese attacked the Russian fleet at Port Arthur. In 1905, fighting also broke out at Mukden, and a naval battle at the Strait of Tsushima. Japan proved itself the superior military power, and Russia eventually surrendered at a great cost in human lives and territory. To the Russian people, defeat at the hands of an Asiatic nation was a great humiliation, and thousands took to the streets in protest. At strikes and demonstrations, people demanded reforms like universal education, a parliament, workers' rights, and amnesty for political prisoners. On the 22nd of January 1905, a St. Petersburg priest, Father Georgy Gapon, led a peaceful march to present a petition to the Tsar. This attacked the exploitation of workers and was signed by over 135,000 people. Support for Tsarism was still high. As massive crowds converged on the Winter Palace, they sang the imperial anthem, God Save the Tsar. But panicking in the face of such large crowds, military units fired at the protesters. No one knows exactly how many were killed. This day became known as Bloody Sunday and destroyed the bond between the people and their Tsar. The year that followed was marred by assassination attempts and riots. Disaffection spread to the Army and Navy, highlighted by the mutiny on the battleship Potemkin in Odessa in June 1905. Workers formed councils called Soviets to organize strikes. In mid-October, a general strike paralyzed trains, factories, schools, and hospitals. Russia was in revolt. The Tsar went some way in meeting people's demands by signing the October Manifesto on October 30th, which established a parliament called the Duma. This provided a forum for political groups to criticize the government and propose reform. The Tsar tolerated the first of these Dumas for a short time before dissolving it. 3 others followed. From 1906 to 1911, the Tsar's principal minister was Peter Stolypin, who was feared for his actions against reformists. He believed that revolution could be avoided by tackling discontent amongst the peasants and passed reformist legislation allowing peasants to own their own land and pass it on to their family. With favorable weather, bumper crops, and continuing foreign investment, the period up to 1914 was relatively stable. World War I united the Russian people against a common enemy. It was popularly regarded as a holy crusade against the Germans. The Russian army's strength lay in its numbers. With 1.5 million men and 3 million more in reserves, it was known as the Russian steamroller. But heavy industry at home was incapable of sustaining a lengthy war and couldn't supply enough munitions. The Germans had superiority in transport capacity and firepower, and by the end of 1914, over 1 million Russians, a quarter of the army, had been killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. Defeat at the front fueled disorder at home, and people turned against the government. In response, Nicholas took personal command of the armies in the field. Many regarded this as a foolish decision, as Nicholas had no prior experience in war and no understanding of military strategy. The Tsar was also now seen as directly responsible for defeats at the front. Nicholas's departure left Empress Alexandra to assume the role of autocrat. But as a German, she was greatly distrusted by the Russian people. Alexandra's main confidant was Rasputin, a Siberian peasant who presented himself as a mystic with healing powers. He had helped Alexandra's hemophiliac son stop bleeding, earning her undying devotion. But Rasputin indulged in wild vices and orgies. Rumors were rife about an indecent relationship with Alexandra, which further damaged Tsarist rule. By 1916, war casualties numbered 5 million, and frontline troops were sometimes down to 1 bullet each per day. Back home, the railways were in disorder. Prices were soaring, and supplies of flour and fuel had all but disappeared. Strikes and riots grew more serious. Under Rasputin and Alexandra, the government had become unstable and corrupt. By 1917, Russia was on the verge of collapse. On February 9th, St. Petersburg, now renamed Petrograd, went on strike. The Tsar ordered the army to use force on the demonstrators. 200 people were killed before the army mutinied, joining the protest. Government buildings were torched, and on February 12th, a provisional government was formed from the Duma, led by Alexander Kerensky. On February 15th, Nicholas signed an act of abdication for himself and his son in favor of his brother, Grand Duke Michael. Michael abdicated the next day, handing over power to the provisional government, and the whole imperial family was placed under house arrest. The fall of the Tsar took everyone by surprise. Two bodies filled the political vacuum: the provisional government and the Petrograd Soviet. Their coexistence was not harmonious. The new government faced many problems: a popular desire to end the war, food shortages, and peasant demands for land. Lenin, who returned to Russia from exile on March 16th, promoted the Bolshevik slogan of peace, bread, and land. Bolstered by growing public support, a group of Lenin's followers attempted a coup in July. This failed, forcing Lenin again into exile. Alarmed at the spiraling slide in support for the government, the Russian commander-in-chief, General Kornilov, attempted a right-wing coup. The government appealed to the Bolsheviks for support, and a new force, the Red Guard, emerged. When the coup failed, the Bolsheviks emerged as heroes. By October, the Bolsheviks had won enough seats on the Petrograd Soviet to take control. Lenin called for an armed insurrection, and on the evening of October 6th, under the cover of darkness, the Red Guard made their move. In Petrograd, they took over key buildings and in a short space of time had the city under control. The next morning, Kerensky fled, and by that night all resistance had collapsed. The new Bolshevik-dominated government made many decrees, amongst them an end to the war, and for all land to be taken over by peasant Soviets. Russia withdrew from the war, and in 1918 signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. This was a national and costly humiliation. Russia lost 1/4 her population and arable land, half her industry, and 3/4 of existing coal and iron reserves. The Bolsheviks changed their name to the Russian Communist Party and created a constitution. All classes in society were declared equal, regardless of wealth or gender. Teaching religion was forbidden, and a secret police, or Cheka, quashed any signs of rebellion. In the first year, they claimed around 50,000 victims. While the communists had overthrown the government, they still had many opponents and didn't control the whole of Russia. Civil war broke out as opposition groups called the Whites tried to overthrow the communists, or Reds. Angered at Russia's withdrawal from the war and fearing the spread of communism, the Allies supported the Whites. Learning of a plan by the Whites to rescue the Tsar, the Reds moved the imperial family to Siberia and then to the Urals, where they were all shot on the night of July 16, 1918. The Civil War was a series of uncoordinated battles. General Kolchak attacked from the east in the spring of 1919. In late spring, General Denikin launched an offensive in the west. Yudenich attacked from the north in the summer of 1919. Next came the Poles in April 1920. The final attack came from the south in June 1920, led by General Wrangel. Under Trotsky's lead, the Red Army defeated each attack and eventually won the war. During the Civil War, Lenin introduced an economic policy known as war communism. Workers were forced to take on particular jobs, and food was strictly rationed. Crops were seized without payment. This kept the Red Army going, but led to widespread poverty and famine. In 1921, 5 million Russians starved to death. War communism was a failure, and a new economic policy was introduced in March 1921, which contained elements of capitalism. Peasants were free to sell their excess grain, and there was private ownership of factories and shops. Trade unions and strikes were allowed, and foreign investment encouraged. In 1923, the country was declared the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics, or USSR. After a stroke and year-long illness, Lenin died on January 21, 1924, at the age of 53. Without his leadership and determination, the new communist nation would not have survived. Lenin's embalmed body was put on public display so that everyone could pay their respects to the founder of Soviet Russia. On Lenin's death, a raging power battle erupted between Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky, the outcome of which would direct the future for Russia and for communism.